The United States Marine Corps boarded an Iranian oil tanker today. The vessel is called the Celestial Sea. United States Central Command confirmed this operation publicly. Marines, armed and in uniform, physically boarded an Iranian-flagged vessel in international waters and took control of it. Let me explain to you why that single sentence is one of the most significant military actions of this entire conflict. When you board an enemy vessel in international waters, you are not conducting a defensive operation. You are projecting force. You are demonstrating that American naval power can reach Iranian-flagged ships wherever they are in the region. You are sending a message to every Iranian tanker captain, every IRGC naval commander, every Iranian official responsible for managing oil exports, that the consequences of defying American authority in these waters are immediate, physical, and personal. This is not a missile strike on a distant facility. This is Americans in boots physically standing on the deck of an Iranian ship. That image, that reality carries a weight that no amount of diplomatic language can replicate. And it happened today, the same day Trump said he will wait a few more days for Iran's response to the new American proposal. The boarding of the Celestial Sea is what waiting looks like when you have Marines. CENTCOM also confirmed a number that deserves more attention than it has received. As of today, American forces have redirected 90 ships and disabled 4 to ensure compliance with the American blockade of Iranian ports. 90 ships redirected, 4 ships disabled. This is an ongoing naval enforcement operation of significant scale happening right now, in real time, alongside the diplomatic process. America is not simply negotiating with Iran while the situation stays frozen. America is actively enforcing its position on the water every single day, redirecting vessel traffic, disabling ships that do not comply, and now physically boarding Iranian-flagged tankers. That operational tempo tells you something very important about how Washington views the current moment. It views it as a period of maximum pressure, not a pause in hostilities. The diplomacy and the military pressure are running simultaneously, each reinforcing the other. Now let me talk about what is coming in 5 days, because I think it is being dramatically underreported in the context of this crisis. The United States Air Force Global Strike Command has announced that it will conduct a test launch of a Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California on May 20th. The launch window is scheduled for between 0701 and 1301 UTC. Military authorities are emphasizing that this is a routine test, planned years in advance, that the missile carries no nuclear warhead, and that it will land in the Pacific Ocean. I want to take those assurances at face value because I have no reason not to. This is almost certainly exactly what it is described as, a routine test of America's ICBM capability that has been planned for a long time. But I also want to be honest about the context in which this test is happening. An ICBM test, even a routine one, even one without a warhead, announced publicly during a period of active military conflict with a country that has nuclear ambitions, sends a signal that the timing makes impossible to separate from the strategic environment. The Minuteman III is the backbone of America's land-based nuclear deterrent. It exists to destroy hardened targets that conventional weapons cannot reach. Announcing its test publicly, allowing that announcement to circulate in the news cycle, alongside reports of Marines boarding Iranian tankers and NATO deploying to the Strait of Hormuz, is part of the pressure architecture, whether it was planned that way or not. Tehran will read this announcement. Tehran will calculate what it means. And Tehran's calculation will factor into the response it sends to Washington's new proposal. Let me talk about that new proposal, because the United States submitted a new document to Iran just days after Iran submitted its own revised 14-point text. This exchange of proposals, America responding to Iran, responding to America, is the most active period of diplomatic communication we have seen since the war began. And it tells you something important. Both sides are still talking. Both sides are still reading each other's documents. Both sides have not yet concluded that the other side is completely beyond reach. Trump himself said he will wait a few days for Iran's response. That is not the language of a man about to order immediate military strikes. That is the language of a man who has given diplomacy a specific, limited, additional window and intends to honor that window. Trump also said Iran is begging to make a deal. That framing, Iran begging, is designed for domestic American consumption. It positions any eventual agreement as an American victory rather than a negotiated compromise. But beneath the framing, the substance is real. Iran is engaged. Iran is responding. Iran is in the process. And that engagement, however it is characterized publicly, is the thing that is keeping the military option on the shelf for a few more days. But here is what I think is the most dramatic and least understood development of the last 48 hours. Trump had a phone call with Netanyahu. Axios described it as difficult. Netanyahu was in a state of anger when the call ended. And Israel, according to N12, was surprised when Trump announced the postponement of the planned attack on Iran. Let me be very precise about what those three pieces of information together tell us. There was a planned attack, an actual operational plan, not just a target list, not just a planning document, but a specific attack that was scheduled to happen. Trump postponed it. And Netanyahu, who expected it to happen and had prepared for it to happen and needed it to happen for his own strategic and domestic political reasons, found out about the postponement in a phone call that left him angry. The leader of America's closest ally in this conflict is angry because America decided not to strike Iran when Israel expected it to. That is a significant fracture in the operational coordination between Washington and Jerusalem. Not a permanent break, not an alliance collapse, but a real disagreement about timing and about how much weight to give to Gulf state requests for more diplomatic time, which Trump cited as the reason for the postponement, and about how much longer to wait for an Iranian response before the military option is activated. The Gulf states asked for more time. Trump listened. Netanyahu is angry. That triangle, America, Israel, and the Gulf states pulling in different directions at a critical moment, is the defining diplomatic dynamic of this week. Trump claims that Gulf nations requested more diplomatic time before the planned strike. But here is the extraordinary detail that cuts against the neatness of that explanation. Several Gulf officials say they were completely unaware of any imminent attack plan. So either Trump is describing Gulf state requests that happened in private channels that the officials making public statements do not know about, which is entirely possible given how compartmentalized these conversations are, or Trump is using Gulf state preferences as a convenient explanation for a decision that was actually driven by other factors. Perhaps the diplomatic activity with Iran, perhaps the Beijing conversations, perhaps his own read of the situation after talking to Netanyahu. Either way, the result is the same. The strike was planned. The strike was postponed. And America's closest regional partner did not see the postponement coming. The French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle has arrived in the operations zone off the Arabian Peninsula. France's Ministry of Armed Forces confirmed this officially, and the NATO Secretary General has stated publicly that many NATO member countries are deploying military resources to the Strait of Hormuz region. Bloomberg is reporting that NATO is actively discussing a potential mission to protect commercial shipping through the strait if the waterway remains closed into early July. Let me explain what this combination of developments tells you about the strategic trajectory. When France sends its only aircraft carrier, a vessel that represents the full weight of French military power projection capability, to the Arabian Peninsula, France is making a statement. France is saying that this is not merely an American problem. It is a problem for the entire Western alliance. And when NATO, the organization that has defined Western collective security for 70 years, begins formally discussing a mission to protect shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, the crisis has crossed a threshold from regional military confrontation into something with direct implications for the security architecture of the entire Western world. NATO protecting the Strait of Hormuz would be an extraordinary mission, unlike anything the alliance has undertaken before. It would put NATO naval forces in direct potential confrontation with Iranian forces that have already demonstrated their willingness to strike shipping, board vessels, and use mines and drones against targets in the waterway. It would extend the alliance's operational footprint into a region that has historically been managed by American bilateral arrangements with Gulf states, rather than through collective NATO structures. And it would force every NATO member to take a public position on the Iran conflict that many of them have carefully avoided taking so far. The July timeline that Bloomberg reports NATO is using as its planning horizon is significant. July is approximately 6 to 8 weeks away. That is the window within which the diplomatic process, the American proposals, the Iranian responses, the Pakistani mediation, either produces something workable or fails completely. NATO is essentially saying, we will give diplomacy until July. After July, we are coming. The mine report is one of the most serious tactical developments of this entire crisis, and it has been almost completely buried under the weight of the other news. A recent United States intelligence assessment, reported by CBS citing American officials, shows that American forces have detected more than 10 mines in the Strait of Hormuz. 10 mines, in a waterway that normally carries 25% of the world's oil and that commercial shipping needs to transit safely. Naval mines are among the most strategically effective and most difficult to counter weapons in any Navy's arsenal. A single mine can sink a supertanker. A minefield in the Strait of Hormuz, even a small one, even one with only 10 weapons, creates an area denial problem that requires specialized mine-sweeping vessels and weeks of painstaking clearance operations to address safely. Every commercial captain who knows mines are in the strait will refuse to transit it without a guarantee of clearance that cannot currently be provided. The mines alone, independent of any other Iranian military action, are sufficient to maintain the effective closure of the strait, even if Iran ordered every other weapon stood down. This is the sophistication of Iranian anti-access strategy. The mines do not require active military engagement to be effective. They simply have to exist. Their presence is the deterrent. The attack on the Barakah nuclear power plant in the United Arab Emirates is one of the most alarming developments of this week, and it has not received nearly the attention it deserves. The UAE issued a strong official condemnation of drone attacks targeting the Barakah plant, stating that the drones originated from Iraqi territory. Barakah is the UAE's civilian nuclear power plant, the first operational nuclear power plant in the Arab world. A successful attack on Barakah would not be a military strike. It would be an attempt to cause a nuclear incident on UAE soil, potentially affecting populations across the Gulf region with radiation. The fact that drones reached the vicinity of this plant, regardless of whether they actually penetrated its defenses, is an escalation of extraordinary significance. It tells you that the conflict has no protected categories. It tells you that the Iraqi territory from which these drones were launched, controlled by Iran-aligned militias, is being used as a platform for strikes that go beyond military targets into civilian nuclear infrastructure. And it tells you that the UAE, which confirmed earlier this week that it had been conducting its own strikes on Iran, is now facing direct retaliation against one of its most sensitive and most catastrophically consequential facilities. In southern Lebanon, the situation continues to deteriorate in ways that the ceasefire label completely conceals. Hezbollah targeted Israeli artillery positions in the town of Yaron. Hezbollah forces clashed with Israeli army units in the town of Hadatha and managed to target and set fire to a Merkava tank. A second Merkava was targeted and neutralized near Hadatha. These are not small incidents. Merkava tanks are among the most advanced and most protected ground combat vehicles in the world. They are designed specifically to protect their crews in the most intense combat environments. Hezbollah destroying Merkava tanks in Lebanese villages is a tactical achievement that will have serious implications for Israeli military planning in the region. And the Israeli army reported that 7 officers and soldiers were injured, some seriously, following the explosion of a booby-trapped helicopter in southern Lebanon. A helicopter. This tells you that Hezbollah's capabilities extend to targeting Israeli aviation assets on or near the ground, not just through drone interceptions, but through placed explosive devices capable of disabling rotary wing aircraft. The operational sophistication that represents is significant, and it is another indicator that Hezbollah's military capability in southern Lebanon has not been degraded to the point where it can no longer threaten Israeli forces effectively. Inside Israeli politics, something happened this week that will have long-term consequences for every aspect of this conflict. The Knesset voted on the preliminary reading of a bill to dissolve itself and advance the election date. The vote passed with a majority of 110 members and without any opposition. 110-0. That is not a normal political vote. That is a political system in crisis. When every member of a parliament votes to dissolve it and hold early elections, it means the current political configuration has lost its ability to govern effectively. Netanyahu did not attend the vote because he was in a security meeting. The dissolution bill is only at its preliminary reading, meaning elections are not imminent, but the political trajectory inside Israel is toward a reckoning that will define the country's future well beyond this conflict. The Israeli public that produced 80% of departing soldiers citing mental distress, the Israeli public living under Hezbollah rocket fire, the Israeli public watching Merkava tanks burn in Lebanese villages, that public is going to have an election. And the outcome of that election will shape Israel's strategic choices in ways that no one can fully predict today. U.S. Air Force refueling aircraft are stationed at Ben Gurion Airport in Israel. This is a logistical detail that carries enormous operational significance. Refueling aircraft, tankers, are the enabling platform for long-range strike operations. They allow fighter jets and bombers to reach targets far beyond their normal operating range and to loiter over target areas for extended periods. Basing American aerial refueling assets at Ben Gurion puts them in position to support operations that originate from Israeli territory or from carriers in the Mediterranean, against targets deep inside Iran. The presence of these aircraft at Ben Gurion is not defensive. Defensive operations do not require aerial refueling positioned in Israel. The operational logic of basing refueling aircraft in Israel points in one direction, toward extended-range strike missions, toward the kind of operation that would be required to reach deeply buried Iranian nuclear facilities or the hardened underground missile sites that ground-based American air power has not yet been able to silence permanently. Russia's new two-seat Su-57D fighter took its first flight this week. China and Russia officially launched their cross years of cooperation in education for 2026 through 2027. Xi and Putin stood together making that announcement. These two events, one military, one diplomatic, are part of the same picture. Russia is continuing to develop military capabilities that will eventually reach Iran and other American adversaries. China and Russia are deepening their institutional relationship across multiple domains simultaneously. The world in which America operates is not one where Washington faces Iran alone. It is one where Iran is embedded in a broader network of great power relationships that complicate every American strategic calculation. The Su-57D is not going to southern Lebanon, but the fact that Russia is advancing its military aviation capability while its partners fight American-led coalitions across multiple theaters tells you something about the long-term trajectory of great power competition that the immediate Hormuz crisis sometimes obscures. Let me close with the clearest, honest assessment I can give of where this situation stands today. Trump has postponed a planned strike on Iran because Gulf states asked for more time and because the diplomatic process, however slow and however frustrating, is still producing paper. Iran's interior minister is meeting Pakistan's interior minister in Tehran. The Pakistani mediation has now expanded from the foreign ministry level to the interior ministry level, meaning the institutional depth of the engagement between Iran and Pakistan is growing, not shrinking. Iran is responding to American proposals. America is responding to Iranian proposals. 5 oil tankers have transited the Strait of Hormuz this week, following IRGC coordination. A system of managed passage is emerging, slowly and imperfectly, but emerging. The USMC boarded the Celestial Sea today to demonstrate that American enforcement continues. NATO is moving toward a July deadline. Charles de Gaulle has arrived. Mines are in the water. And Netanyahu is angry that the strike was postponed. All of those things are true simultaneously. This is not a situation moving cleanly toward either war or peace. It is a situation moving messily, dangerously, and urgently toward a decision point that cannot be deferred indefinitely. Trump said he will wait a few more days. A few days. That is the window. After that window, the Marines who boarded the Celestial Sea today are not the last boots that stand on Iranian vessels in these waters, and the refueling aircraft at Ben Gurion are not there to watch.